Thank you for the opportunity, and thanks both to Melinda and to Ross for hosting this. Um, Very much appreciate the opportunity to talk today, and little challenged following Dr. Saab. Excellent presentation, but thank you also to Malar for extending the invitation. Amongst the many hats that I wear, I am the chair of the IABC Ethics Committee, and as Ross has shamelessly plugged, as we've had this conversation, it is Ethics Month. So from the perspective of the IABC Ethics Committee, this is a very important showcase of ethics, and a very important month for us to focus on what are ethics, how do they fit, and the whole concept that I think Dr. Saab very ably took us through on misinformation and disinformation. And I'm going to talk a little bit from this perspective, from the communication perspective, and how misinformation and disinformation causes us some issues. So the first thing I want to show you video, and I want to watch the video, and then I want to talk about whether you believe. So my question to you, true or not?
Looked CGI to me.
I think we also have the advantage that we're looking at it on a big screen, not looking at it on your phone. But anybody think it's real? So this video was posted on January 17th. The gentleman who posted it, Alexei Patrev, is a CGI creator. It sort of made the rounds. I saw it about 3 days ago. It just, for whatever reason, showed up on my, I think it was on my Facebook stream. I don't remember what it was, some social media. It was posted on Instagram, and I watched it the first time, and I'm like, wow, guy didn't live. I wonder how he got the video to people to see. And then I watched it again, and I'm like, I don't think it's real. But I read the comments, and the comments that people were posting were thoughts and prayers to the person who took this video, brave person who took the video in the face of danger, what a great video to share with the world, all these comments. And there were, I think when I looked at it, about 19,000 comments that people had made around this video. The reality is it is fake. And it's not the first time it's happened. So, if you go back and you look, there was another similar situation of some fake video in 2019 on the New Zealand volcanic eruption. What was falsely claimed to be actual video of a volcanic eruption is not at all true and is not at all real. But the problem is there are people out there who are taking it as real and taking it and recirculating it without thinking, without checking, and without doing the due diligence. And in fact, the creator of the video, if you look up this story from AFP Fact Check, the creator of the video says, I never posted it as a real video. I posted it to showcase my CGI experience. So even the creator is not misrepresenting it, but it's what happens in the social media world, and it's what happens with misinformation and disinformation. And there's lots of definitions on misinformation and disinformation. And I just pulled this one because really at the end of the day, what we're talking about is this concept of sharing bad or debunked information. And misinformation can be things that somebody tells you, you don't fact check it, and it's a rumor that becomes fact. Disinformation is bad information that we get there by jumping to conclusions. And there's lots of situations that happen over time with this. And the problem for us as communicators is both misinformation and disinformation are really hard for us to fight, because just like the video of the volcano, it's tough for people. Once it's out there, it's tough for us to go, wait a second, it's not true. No, 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 this is the truth. And so that becomes the challenge for us from a communication perspective. So what we really need to look at is identifying, how do we go about identifying misinformation? How do we go about looking at, is it true? What's the source? If we look at the source of that information, what's its mission? Is this a legitimate source? Is this an actual valued source that does their due diligence? And we need to look at, is there more to the story? Is there more that is out there? When you start to investigate, are there more sources? Are there supporting sources that say that this story is true? And look at who wrote it. Look at what that source is. And I'm in Canada, and we have some publications that when you read it, you go, oh, okay, I know what that's about. It's not true, but it's clickbait. It's a way to get you to read the story. So is it a joke? Sometimes the big problem with humor, particularly written, is it's very subjective. And what's really funny, I tell this to people when I do media training, don't use humor, because what's really funny to you may not be so funny to the next person, and they may not be able to see through that area of humor and be able to discern that it's just a joke. And check your own biases too. Does what you're reading support what you believe and support what you think and the way that you think? And are you looking at things from a critical perspective? And check the date. I have a great example. I have somebody I'm friends with on social media, and she is like the most unreliable person for information. And a really good example is, she's a real animal lover, and there's a lot of forums that post lost animals, and she jumps on that bandwagon all the time. And she posted a lost dog story, and didn't do any of these things on the list. Posted the lost dog story, and her comment was, please help please help this dog to find his way home. And when I looked at the date, it was from 2019. And she posted this recently. And when you looked further into the post, so I mean, I look at these things critically. I clicked on the person who lost the dog. They in fact have found their dog. They found their dog in 2019. So she is propagating this whole thing with this dog that's supposedly lost, that's hopefully still at home. So that, she doesn't do the critical analysis. And I sent her a note and said, hey, just so you know, that dog found his way home in 2019. And I said, you might want to take your post down. Oh no, it's good to share those things so that people know that sometimes dogs are lost. So, there's still people out there probably sharing this poor dog that was lost 3 years ago.
Nancy, may I jump in? It's Melinda, and just ask you a little question at this point, because it's a particular, I guess, concern of mine. I wonder, are you seeing a lot of this over in, say, more of the region where you are, and in Canada, where there is less of this ability to have that critical thinking? I know I can speak for Australia. I'm based in Melbourne, where there's been a big conversation around education. They've stripped out funding for critical thinking and arts degrees, and fact checking has sort of been stripped from some sort of areas of journalism. And because we've got sort of citizen journalism, a lot of curated content, a lot of that discipline's not there. It's a huge concern, and really plays to the whole question around ethics. And I wonder, do you have any thoughts around that, and how you might people might sort of build that in as a muscle, or any areas or courses that you might direct them to? As I said, particularly in Australia, without what I would consider those fundamental things around critical thinking, that's really been stripped out of, say, the arts courses that aren't as available or are far more costly for people now.
And you're right. I mean, I think this is a global issue. I don't think this is a regional issue. I think this is a global issue. Is if you just look at media, and you look at how media has changed even in the last 10 years, the advent of citizen journalism and what that brings, we have right now I think that it's sort of become, sadly, a global story. We have these truck protests right now in our capital and locally in the province that I live in. And it's all about misinformation. It's all about a group of people who, I think are just angry and just angry about a lot of things and have used COVID as an excuse to share their anger. But the challenge is that there's a lot of misinformation that comes out of those stories. And if you don't have the ability to think critically, and you're right, I mean, we're not teaching this, and it's I've often said it's really tough to teach people common sense. We can teach them how to write, we can teach them how to edit, we can teach them whatever skills we need to teach them, but having that common sense is really tough. And critical thinking is really important. And I think the part that's missing in a lot of this is journalism and reporters are stretched to the max. Journalism is not what it was even 10 years ago, and social media gives people who aren't authorities and aren't experts on subjects the platform. And sort of going back to what Dr. Sab was talking about, you've got a lot of influencers, and people are getting their news from influencers. They're getting their news from places that aren't credible and aren't doing the fact checking that needs to be done. So I think as communicators creates a much more complex world for us to communicate our message in. And the lack of critical thinking is really making that challenging, both on the audience side and and not only the organizations that we work for, but the people that we work with.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nancy. It's really interesting insights that you share. And I think my concern is that whole echo chamber that we talk about too.
Yeah.
And that's frightening. But anyway, don't let me stop you. Thanks for letting me ask you that question.
No problem. And happy to take any questions as they come along, if anybody has questions as we go through this. The challenge is, how do we stop this? And this is, I think, a bit what you were just talking about is, we have to correct the incorrect, and we have to share content, and we have to share correct content. And the big thing that people have to do is research to make sure your facts are correct. If you're going to comment on things on social media, make sure that it's about fact and not emotion. And we I think it's probably fair to say in the areas that you all are in is the same. Particularly with COVID, there's a lot of emotion that comes with the way that people have been sharing things. But we see this with a lot of other issues too. I do a lot of crisis management in my career, and you see a lot of emotion that comes into crisis situations where facts come after and emotion and reaction comes first. And we really need to sort of, if we check our own behavior, we can help to manage this going forward. If things, this is the basic tenet, I think, of communication. If the facts aren't correct, we need to correct them, and we need to make sure that we go back to the source and say, hey, wait a second, this isn't correct. We want a retraction. We want the facts corrected, because as a communicator, we all know that if we don't do that, we live with those incorrect facts for the rest of our days and spend the rest of our days trying to correct those and correct those errors. And so sharing the factual information is critical, and then correcting them as they go on is also really important. And there's lots and lots of resources out there. So, to your point, Melinda, about things that you can do, I just pulled a smattering of things that are out there, but there's things that you can add, for example, to Chrome. Trusted News is one, and I don't advocate for any of these. They're just things that I picked up in some research and have heard from other people that they use. But Trusted News is one. You can add it to Chrome. Google has fact-checking tools. If you use Google, you can get what they believe is trusted results. There's a program called NewsGuard that helps you decide which news sources are there to trust, and it's not algorithm based, which is a little bit better than some of the algorithms that skew content to what you've looked at. If you've ever, this happens to me frequently, where I sit in a restaurant, talk to a friend about something, and then go home and look at my social media, and there's a whole bunch of stuff on the right side saying, you were interested in blue pens. Here's 15 kinds of blue pens. So NewsGuard is another thing that's out there. And then There's also a verification handbook that you can get as well, that helps you to, verify digital content. So there's lots and lots of resources out there. One of the other things I came across that's really helpful is the Canadian Public Relations Society in Canada has produced a professional standards decision tree. And you can find this on their website, but it basically walks you through a process that helps you, if you're working on a project or you're working on something and you're not quite sure about it, you can go through this thought process about, and there's different gates that take you to helping you to make that decision. So, there's tons and tons of things from an ethical perspective out there to help you make your decisions, to help you find the right solutions and ask the right questions to come to the right conclusions. IABC also has a ton of content on the website, and I would encourage you, if you haven't seen it yet, is the IABC Guide for Practical Communication. It has a whole section on ethics and some case scenarios that you could work through, some really, really good points that Barbara Puffer wrote up this section. And I know that Ross was talking about an interview that will be posted talking with her. And I really encourage you to listen to that and to look at this section, because there's some really, really invaluable information in there. Dr. Sab, you have your hand up.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're sharing this ethics decision process tree, and you're talking about I think each organization has its own code of ethics, but personally, right, sometimes I feel like having this code of ethics is somewhat could be like a utopian kind of idea, because like for me, I work with strategic communication department. Sometimes when we let's say I design a campaign, and I design it from what I think through this process of ethical decision process and all that. But when it comes to my CEO, and the CEO decides that no, I don't want it this way, I want it that. So at the end of the day, our bosses or people in charge gets to veto whatever ethical process that we have gone through, and we have like what the bosses want, the bosses gets. So what would your comments be on that, Nancy?
So Millar and I have had this conversation before, because I think a lot of this is very regional. I think it's a little bit different in North America than it is in the regions that you have to deal with. And IABC, you sort of segue nicely into my next slide, which is the IABC Code of Ethics. All members of IABC are asked to adhere to this Code of Ethics, and to use this as the gauge and the guide for how we make decisions. And I think the big challenge that you have is that regionally your environment is a lot different. And I think IABC sort of talked about this and had conversations about this, is the fundamentals of the Code of Ethics are sort of a code of behavior and a code of conduct. But how do we keep our bosses in check? And what are the consequences to that too? Within my environment, I've had very serious conversations on 2 occasions in my career where I've worked in places where I've been asked to do something that were outside of the bounds of what I believe to be ethical. And in both cases, in one case, I was willing to quit my job. And in the other case, I think it was a misunderstanding. But not everybody's in that position. Not everybody's willing to walk away from their job for something that they think is ethical. And sort of as Melinda said earlier, we take our reputation with us. So that was my conversation with my boss, and this was many, many years ago, but my conversation with my boss was, if I do this, this is my reputation that's on the line. It's the organization's reputation and my reputation. I'm not willing to do that, and I'm not willing to sacrifice that. So either we come to a compromise or I got to leave. And I think it's challenging because the environment that you have makes it difficult for that to be the case, because you don't fix it by leaving. You only go to the next place where that has that challenge. So I think that a lot of that is societal and a lot of that is regional.
Nancy,